Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's coffee break. Plans useless. Planning is indispensable. Storage as a service and you. My name is Andrew Miller, your producer and host, lead principal technologist here at Pure for the Coffee Break series. I'm joined today, excited to be joined by John Brett, Senior Director, Subscription Portfolio. I think I got it right. As always, this is a series. Thank you for joining us month after month. You can find all the previous recordings, which in my not so humble opinion have aged better over time, because as you'll see if you're joining for the first time, we try and take more of a solution focus. The goal is for the first half to be more kind of educational or podcast than webinar. And then actually in the back half, we talk about what Pure does in this space. Logically, of course, the coffee cards and, paying for Zoom has to come from somewhere. You can find this on the Pure Storage website, along with a bunch of other great series, Tech Talks, Flash Guru, etc. Just purestorage.com/events. And actually, then you can even go back and find previous ones. I've intentionally left some of the older ones. You can see I took the screenshot, back in October, November, et cetera, previous times. Now, I do want to make sure to properly advertise Pure Accelerate. I mean, I get a paycheck from somewhere, so we got to do it, right? So June 14th through 16th, it's going to be at Resorts World Las Vegas. And rather than say anything else, I'll just roll the video. I feel like I ought to wait for the last hit there on the, maybe it's a marimba, I think. Of course, there's a little bit of housekeeping here. Thank you for joining. And sometimes it's for the content. Sometimes it's for the coffee card. I get that. You'll see those about a week, within the next week or so. There will be a drawing. Some of the folks that are listed there, we love you and appreciate you attending. You can't receive the items. I am your host, Andrew Miller, lead principal technologist. In this case, as I'm here every month, for better or worse, I don't fully reintroduce myself, though. Customer for a while, partner for a while, tech marketing. I think for this topic, though, what I want to do is call out a little bit of, as I've gone along in my career, what I found more and more is, even as I've tried not to lose my technical soul, you've got to embrace the business side, and it's more about outcomes than it is technologies, right? Even as the technologies have to be legitimate and better and differentiated. And I frankly saw it even as a customer. I would have times where I didn't actually align well enough to the outcomes of the people I was supporting, and the projects that I thought were really cool didn't get approved. And you felt like, man, why did I do all that work? Well, part of it is like understanding what drives business from an outcome standpoint. John, do you mind briefly introducing yourself? Of course, part of the first section here is more of that, but over to you.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here, Andrew. Thank you. So John Brett, I have been a happy Puritan now for 2.5 years. Happy to say they're happy years. Prior to joining Pure, I spent the entirety of my career really on the client side of the table, as I like to say. Pure was my first technology solutions company. And when I was on that side of the table, I spent the entirety of that time, almost the entirety, in the financial services sector, where I worked at some of the bulge bracket investment banking houses in their technology departments for many, many years. And for the 12 or so years immediately preceding joining Pure, I consulted to many of the same companies I previously worked for and others in technology services, helping them with a variety of technology transformation initiatives, everything from early cloud adoption strategies to digital transformation initiatives, even some large-scale technology outsourcing engagements. That's enough about my career history. The lovely young lady that you see in the picture with me is my darling daughter, Ava, my pride and joy. That is a picture from her 21st birthday celebration, not a few years back now, where she insisted, being of legal drinking age, that I take her to an establishment and buy her a cocktail. And I relented, and I did so. And I remember she joked, "Look, Dad, it's my very first alcoholic beverage." To which I replied, that has about the same probability of that being your first alcoholic beverage as the one in my hand being my first alcoholic beverage. And we know that probability is zero. So kids today, I don't know, Andrew, what are we going to do with them?
I have a feeling there's some intended lack of awareness at times as parents. Maybe is the best strategy, just to a certain degree. Next month, thank you, John. Next month, I'll actually be joined by another Jonathan Carnes. We're going to be diving into a truly unified storage array. This is actually talking about flash array file and our approach to unified storage, having a little bit of fun with themes there. That Tetris is amazing, but not for your storage, about having to move things around and try to figure out where does this fit and carve off this resource and that way and that kind of stuff. There's even some of my own personal history there too. But we are here to talk about storage as a service and plans versus planning. So the agenda is always a little bit lightweight, not too much. We're going to start off with doing a little bit around storage as a service and actually looking at this both from kind of a history standpoint and actually really a little bit of a reality check too, kind of what really is it? Because sometimes these terms get a little bit mushy. Then you heard John mention part of what used to do in the past was actually helping folks write. I think you said this, unless I'm my brain freeze here, but you did actually used to help folks write actually RFPs, the requests around these kind of projects, like officially like a consultant, you got paid money to do this. So we're going to go look at market comprehension principles that you can use, hopefully as you're evaluating the space. Then, of course, we'll dive into what Pure offers here and then go into some of the most recent developments because we've been leading in this space, doing a lot here. And hopefully, as you have questions, please feel free to put them into these Zoom Q&A section. We have folks, both Matt and Errol and Olivia here to help with that. Thank you all. As well as, of course, feel free to put just general commentary into the chat too. It's always fun to kind of watch the stream of commentary as it goes by. But before we dive in, Olivia, do you mind launching the first poll there? We're not going to be quite as goofy as last month where we were asking what's your favorite dinosaur. We kind of go back and forth with the level of the poll questions. But this one, how predictable are your storage demands? Can usually plan well year by year, regularly unbudgeted, year over year growth, where stuff is moving to the cloud, something else. Please go ahead and put that in the chat. And actually, I appreciate the folks who are asking how Emily's doing. She is still here. She's doing lots of great stuff. Olivia's doing lots of great stuff. The team keeps growing because we keep having more to do. So, and I appreciate that too. It's cool. But John, let's go ahead and dive in. As often is the case, we're not going to start with a ton of slides here. But storage as a service, there's been some evolution over time, some claims made in the past, kind of what's real and not. Do you mind just kind of starting us off with a little bit of the, kind of the history of the storage as a service landscape?
Sure. Yeah. And from my recollection, when I go back to the earlier parts of my career, and maybe this is a particular trait to investment banking technology, but I doubt it. But there were these moments, I'm sure it applies to every industry. There were these moments of first mover advantage. And the trading departments would get really focused on a particular trading strategy, whether it was algo trading or high frequency trading or whatever the trading strategy du jour was, and they would pour a tremendous amount of capital into the space, including technology infrastructure, to support that business objective, and sometimes the gains were really impressive, but ultimately competition would kick in and trading volumes would shrink, or certainly the trading profits would shrink, and the business would come back to technology and say, look, our cost base is too high. And we would say, wait, we thought you had this runaway train, we could hardly keep up. It's a sunk cost. I don't know what we can do for you here. And to be fair, sometimes it would be just the opposite, right? The business would already have a tiger by the tail, and we'd have a serious problem trying to keep up with deploying infrastructure in time, and that would represent a real opportunity cost because we couldn't deliver at the pace they really needed to. And so we looked around for answers and naturally turned to our technology providers for some help there and saying, look, we have this waxing and waning of consumption, and we need help in solving it. You call yourselves our partners. What can you help us with here? And the earliest requests out to the technology partner community was met, and I'm talking about the suppliers, met with ideas around leasing and financing proposals, and leasing obviously had been around forever and has proven value in what it's good at, managing cash flow, preserving capital, et cetera, and a host of other things. But when it comes to trying to deal with a variable consumption, it's almost a tone deaf response. It's okay, so you've flattened my cost, but my consumption is peaking and troughing, and you're really not helping me with the problem that I put forward, right? I have changing demand. You're just giving me a flat cost curve, and that helps, thanks. But I have a changing demand, and I need help with that. I need a consumption-driven solution. And we pushed and pushed, and ultimately we saw the introduction of things like capacity on demand and capacity upgrade on demand. But honestly, they were half measures at best. They were blunt-edged instruments that had so many strictures that it rendered them almost useless, right? They were very, very chunky in nature. They didn't really have the flexibility, the agility to address, changing consumption patterns that were often changing, on a moment's notice. And that was principally because they were still leases. It's just that instead of the clients carrying the leases, it was the suppliers who were now leasing it, and it was behind the scenes. But it was very, very limited in the flexibility it could offer. And the time has passed, and all of this unmet demand for true consumption-based models accumulated, and ultimately some very smart people at some very large companies with some very deep pockets said, hey, I think we have an idea for that. And they started to build the public cloud offerings, and they're great. They have a dimension of consumption. They have a dimension of operational excellence to them, which is important as well. Even a superior customer experience. But they are over there, right? They're not being delivered to you. You've got to go get them, and sometimes public cloud adoption is a bit of a heavy lift for certain clients for a variety of reasons. That could be an entire coffee break hour in itself, Andrew, so we don't want to go there. But clearly there are some challenges with adopting the public cloud and reaping the rewards of everything that it promises. So, it's been this slow march towards improvement, but very, very almost a foot dragging in the supplier community when it comes to delivering a true storage as a service solution, or as a service solutions in general when it comes to technology.
When we were talking about this, and as everyone knows who joins, I think we prepare for this. It's not scripted, right? But we prepare. It's about respecting the audience. But when you and I were chatting, we're thinking both, if anyone remembers Nicholas Carr writing about utility computing, some idea that IT is going to become entirely commoditized. There's been some of that, but there definitely hasn't been some of that, right? There's still differentiating pieces there. And then even from a public cloud standpoint, sometimes it's like it's what we all as an industry want, but it's not necessarily or what we want from a consumption standpoint, but it's not maybe where we want it. Or there's all these other things we have to think about, like application refactoring that we're not necessarily thinking about, but we got to go do to get some of the other benefits. And it's like, that drags along a bunch of other work to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think, let me, even if you don't mind. Oh yeah. And actually there's one other comment. I mean, we think about 5-year planning. I mean, that is just almost impossible today. I used to get asked for 3 to 5 year plans as a customer, but I don't know how you do that today even.
Yeah, I think all the reasons that drove us to ask for these consumption models back then, they've almost been magnified now, right? So the planning timeline is much shorter. There's so much uncertainty in the environment, geopolitical unrest and economic
cost of power,
chaos, and sprinkle in an occasional pandemic, and
hopefully occasional, hopefully very occasional.
Exactly. Sorry, Andrew, to close off the point, it just makes for, so much uncertainty that it makes for a 5-year planning just almost impossible.
Let me even shift the gears a little bit. So personal aspect, thank you for the kind of the history review. Before we even kind of shift to section number 2, I may pull together pieces here, but there was a story or two here where this is it's not just history, like, we're in school and, reading the history book. I think there was both a example for you of even a personal one when you were in an operational role, but then also even someone almost maybe having kind of a nervous breakdown at a large bank, anonymized, that you were working with. You might kind of weaving those in here too.
Yeah, of course. So, we all, that achieving that alignment between the cost of technology and its actual consumption is one aspect of as a service models. And we all want to do right by the company and spend its money wisely. But when it really gets personal is when you get into the operational aspects of this. And that's where, again, I found it incredibly frustrating in a part of my career in working with technology suppliers around operations. I did my share of operational roles, and I would take the late night phone calls. I would be on those weekend long outage recovery calls. And I tell you, Andrew, everybody says weekends are too short. There's no shorter weekend when you're trying to recover from a mission critical outage, and you're in my case, I'm on the East Coast of the US, and we're trying to fight, the start of day, which in APAC is our Sunday night, right? So you've got this tight window, and it's just this painful existence, and things just snowball, and one thing leads to another, and you wonder where your technology suppliers are in those really critical operational moments. And in my history, it was a very frustrating experience to get them to participate, to deliver the operational value they'd already promised. And I think you alluded to a more recent experience when I was consulting to a global bank, and on their institutional side, I wasn't even involved directly in the particular project, but they were doing a massive refresh of their payment systems infrastructure, principally around their storage infrastructure, one of our competitors. And lo and behold, they were forced to do a forklift migration, and it didn't go terribly well. It got done, to be fair. Ultimately, it got done, but over a long period of time with much trial and tribulation. And I noticed that the lead storage architect engineer, who was principal for delivering the project at that layer, he kind of disappeared for a few days, kind of an unofficial leave of absence. And I gave it a day or two, but then I gave him a text and I say, hey, I know that wasn't easy, but you must be relieved it's behind you. Job well done. It didn't go perfectly, but they never do. And his response was, all he could think about in 18 months' time is he had to start planning to do that all over again. And we both decided that whoever was going to do that job in 18 months' time, it wasn't going to be him, that we would both make an effort over 18 months to get him out of that role, because just for his own sanity, for his own health and welfare, he could not go through that again.
So I know, and we're going to continue exploring this as we go a little bit. I mean, I noted your MBA. I'm not. My father was. I grew up hearing some of the terms. But as we continue on, we're going to explore some terms kind of around de-risking and full business case. I think, though, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here, and I will share the results as we move into section number 2 here. I will end that, and I will click the share button. So for anyone who is curious, this is actually, hopefully this is interesting for you too. If you have 1,000+ folks of your, peers almost on. So 41%, good for you. You're able to plan well year by year. That's actually, frankly, maybe higher than I expected. I'm looking in the camera, John. It's like, yeah, me too. But that's still a minority, I'd say, compared to unbudgeted requests. Growth is higher than expected. Those two would add up. And then, yeah, on-prem to cloud, it's a real factor, and something else to put in the chat. I will go ahead and I'll stop sharing that. We'll move into section number 2 here. So this is where we want to, I think, going back into a little bit of your consulting days. Ooh, actually, before we do that, we are going to go ahead and actually, Olivia, if you don't mind launching poll number 2, and we will just go ahead and leave that one up there. So for you joining us today, kind of a question around really just your knowledge of as-a-service consumption models. And if you're looking at storage as a service, doing it now, et cetera, that's kind of self-explanatory. We'll just leave that up as we go through this. So thinking about kind of market comprehension principles, and there were 4 or 5 that we put in here as I think worth talking about just to help understand. So you can read them here. I chose not to do builds on the slide. Hey, y'all can read the words and stop paying attention to us for a second if you want to. But John, you mind? I'll chime in here periodically, but let's just start off with, what is as a service really? What does it actually mean?
Well, it's a particular pet peeve of mine, right? So many things now are labeled as a service only because they relieve the person or the company from owning an asset. Everything that isn't owned is now as a service, but there's so much more to it. And we alluded to it in the early part of this conversation, right? I mean, I'll take the very simple example, and I know it's a bit trite, but just by way of example, everybody loves a good analogy, right? So the rental car companies versus the rideshare companies, right? They both deliver a service. They both have utility. They're even consumption oriented in their own fashion to a greater or lesser extent. For a rental car company, you pay by the day, or maybe by the mile, maybe not as consumption driven as the rideshare companies, but they have a consumption dimension. But only one of those is an as a service solution, in my view. The rental car companies certainly provide you with the means to achieve an outcome, getting from point A to point B, but they're not involved in reaching that outcome, right? That is on you.
So drive the car, get the gas,
exactly.
make sure to fill up before you go back to the airport.
Exactly. Rideshare companies, different story, right? They are involved. They are there with you, trying to achieve the targeted outcome, getting you to from point A to point B. And to me, I know it's an oversimplification. I know it's a trite example, but for me, it is illustrative, I think, of the difference. And I see all too often, just because you aren't buying something that a company would say, well, now it's as a service because you're not purchasing it. But they lack that vested interest in delivering the outcome for a true as a service model.
And I think I'm going to key off that and go out of order a little bit here, because in some ways, or out of order on the slide, it's our presentation. We can go out of order. So what is it as a service? Sometimes the way if it's really as a service is what it looks like when you exit. Do you mind kind of describing that and linking that to how you can kind of have a clue if it's really a service based on the exit?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if you're acquiring a service, then when you put your hand up, or when the service comes to its natural end, you should be able to walk away freely and without encumbrance, right? And I think it's important for a lot of the as a service models being pitched, especially in the technology space, to look at what happens at the end of a service term, right? We all agree to commit for a particular period, but what happens at the end of the term? To your point, it's, are you free to walk away? Is it, thanks for the service, now I'm done? Is it as simple as getting out of that Uber and walking away? Or is there something more involved that you've been tied into by this heavy commercial language that adjudicates the end of a service term? And that to me is one of the telltale signs, right? And it's the kind of thing that sometimes, unfortunately, we forget to look for in entering into these agreements, is what happens at the end of the term. Are you able to walk away without any encumbrances? Do you just walk away, no hard feelings, and be on your merry way? And I think in this time of uncertainty, going back to that short planning horizon, you need that flexibility. You need that freedom to say, thanks, it's been great, it's enough. I don't want this to be a messy breakup, but the service was great. It's time to move on. You don't want to have that heavy commercial burden at the end of these terms.
So I may in a minute, I may kind of run through flexibility and on demand, but I want to make sure to have you focus a little bit on SLG, SLA, their acronyms. We all live in acronym, life, and even the idea of de-risking. Do you mind parking there a little bit before we wrap up section number 2?
Absolutely. So that what is, when you want to have someone, a technology supplier, really committed to your cause, really vested in your outcomes, there is no better way than as a service model. And part of an as a service model is to make sure that there are true service level commitments, right? That is how a service provider puts skin in the game. And I'm not talking here about a full managed service. We know they exist, and they are, very good at what they're aimed to provide. But sometimes companies just need an as a service solution to allow to get the supplier to live up to all the promises they've made around the solutions that they offer. Service level guaranteed, service level commitments, some aren't worth the paper that they're written on, because they have no repercussions for the supplier if things don't go according to the service level commitments, right? So that's where you really need to understand that, in a shared risk model, you're not trying to shift all the risk over to the supplier, but in a shared risk model, there should be some skin in the game, some real skin in the game, not just promises, not just not just marketing, but really clearly stated what happens if you don't live up to your end of the bargain.
This even to me links to, like, if we go to a classic executive level or maybe a CFO level, there's three reasons to do something: to make money, to save money, or to remove risk. And so even for you now, this is a kind of comment to the audience, maybe a little bit of a career coaching comment, thinking in terms of risk and even de-risking. That can resonate further as you talk to people at the org chart, or maybe you move up the org chart yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. In the financial services industry, risk is a very quantifiable entity, right? A quantifiable element. So de-risking is an important, and it's a sign of value. It's important to ensure the outcomes that companies are seeking to achieve.
I think I'll pull these last two together if you don't mind, John. So just thinking about flexibility and also kind of on demand. So flexibility, there has to be, obviously, often there are some kind of minimums, but you don't want them to be too low than certain ranges. So you can roll with the punches and have it actually be consumption based. Consumption based is a key principle there, as well as the ability to be on demand versus always locked into a certain reserved commit. And this is where sometimes the let's be contrarian is sometimes conversations that you and I have, John, is like people are like, oh, I never want to have on-demand pricing. Maybe say a reserved commit is at a certain more discounted price level. On demand is not discounted. This is like even a common cloud model. Sure. The catch is if you never consume on demand at all, it means you were overpaying all the rest of the time. So being in on-demand territory, on-demand pricing level, it's not good like all the time, every single day, or crazy amounts. You want to be able to move up the reserve as your utilization grows. But if you're never on demand, it actually means that you're overspending what you need to be relatively. This is classic sizing stuff. We're never going to get it exactly right. We're going to be too high. We're going to be too low, but we don't want to be too far off, kind of thing. Right. And on demand can actually help with that.
Absolutely true. We found clients that enter subscriptions into our as a service solution, and they openly state, I want to set my reserve at a level that I'll never have to worry about, reaching into the on-demand and paying that. And we try and express to them, well, you might be thinking about this wrong. Over time, they start to realize that by being so far below that committed level of consumption, they're just leaving money on the table, right? And they come to understand that, and they come to appreciate that, and they get more wise. And the clients who have been in the model longest are the ones that do exhibit a more regular consumption of the on-demand, the variable portion, and they are reaping the rewards for it. That's the most financially efficient way to use these models.
Now, if you're wondering, is there more in this area? There absolutely is. And we actually published a RFP guide, storage as a service. You can see the table of contents there. I'm actually going to go, and I think I had this. I'll put the link into the chat. If you download this, it is literally a PDF that looks like this. You can see the table of contents. You can see a bunch of the questions. Let's be real. It's got a Pure logo on it, but there's questions in here that you can and should be asking that really don't have anything to Pure. Is it linked to an identified asset? Who truly owns the hardware? If there's dramatic change, of course, we've thought about these things for our models, but these are questions that I would strongly recommend that you look at, you think about, and use this guide, whether it's you're looking at Pure or even possibly other, even outside of storage as a service offering, some of this applies to as a service in general.
Sure.
Moving in to section number 3, which is where we are going to dive into, as you might have guessed, to what Pure does in this space. I think I'll just go ahead and close poll number 2 for folks, and I'll share back the results here. So my knowledge of as a service, this kind of feels right, medium. I'm familiar, but I want to know more. That's probably why people attended, aside from the coffee cart. So, and then are you looking at storage as a service on-prem? And that's fascinating to me, John. It's not quite evenly split, but pretty close.
Interesting, isn't it? Wow.
So, and some folks that are still fully purchase assets, understood. And there's absolutely companies and business models where that makes sense, but either it's, using it now, 6 months, 12 months, et cetera. Okay. So let's move into now what Pure does in this space. You may remember we actually had Paul Ferraro on a while back. I'm actually going to pull one slide out of order here. So if you remember exploring the service economy and Pure Storage back in May of 21, actually right on 2 years ago. And there's some humor there too, because I think, John, when Paul called you, if you wanted to come here, you said you'd had too many scars looking for consumption models. Like it couldn't be true.
Yeah, Paul is my manager today, and he I actually consulted to Paul when he was also investment banking and did some work for his company. And Paul and he thought very kindly thought of me when he arrived at Pure, reached out and said, "Hey, I think there's something you should hear about." And I said, Paul, I'm happy to listen to you in deference to our history, in deference to our friendship, but just know that, I bear the same scars that you do in trying to find these consumption-based models. I don't know why you think Pure has the better mousetrap, but again, in deference to our history, I'll hear you out. And the more I listened to him and others he put in front of me, the more I became convinced that Evergreen One was the real deal. And we've been kind of dropping hints about the characteristics a quality storage as a service solution should have. So yeah, why not take a look at what
Let's
good
dive
looks
in.
like?
Yeah.
And there is no better example than Pure's Evergreen One. Evergreen One is a true consumption-based storage as a service solution, and it offers foundational block, file, and object storage services, but it places a focus on data and its consumption, not on capacity. Capacity models for acquiring technology resources have been around since the dawn of the technology age, and proven themselves time and time again to be not only incredibly inefficient, but incredibly ineffective at managing that risk that we've been talking about. Evergreen One is a true service subscription, leading to its ability to qualify as OpEx, not CapEx. And because customers are subscribing to a flexible service and not just buying a product, buying hardware, there's always going to be a more direct alignment to the business outcomes that they're seeking to achieve, even when the targeted outcomes change over time. As is the case with everything Pure offers, it's simple and it's fast. It offers transparency and predictability in the unit of measure that it uses, and agility and efficiency in its ability to scale that unit of measure up and down as needed, as the consumption curve changes. It removes the risk related to platforms that can't deliver consistent performance levels, and eliminates tech debt and technology obsolescence risk in general, because it is backed by Pure's evergreen, non-disruptive upgrade architecture. Everything is included in the unit rate. That includes access to all features available in Purity at the start of a term, and any that are released during the full term. All a client need do is upgrade to the level of Purity that has the feature they want, and it's theirs for the taking, not the asking, the taking, no additional charge. And at the end of the term, as we alluded to earlier, Andrew, there is never an exit penalty. You just walk away, and you have no further obligations to Pure. Now, because it is a subscription to a service, as we've been talking about, it's backed by true SLAs with commitments from Pure, and it's organized around a catalog of service tiers, each of those tiers backed by virtually unlimited access to on-demand consumption to promote that true variable consumption dimension. As you see on the slide, Evergreen One can be consumed in a customer's private data center, in a co-location facility. We work with them all, anyone you want to work with, or indeed out in the public cloud. Wherever the client wants to run their technology operations, we can deploy Evergreen One. And clients will often ask, well, what does that mean that Evergreen One can be used in the public cloud? You're not deploying physical arrays out into the public cloud domain, are you? And no, we're not. But our Cloud Block Store software solution can be deployed into Azure and AWS, drawing on the cloud service provider native resources to instantiate a virtualized but fully functional flash array out in the cloud domain. And because CBS is deployed under an Evergreen One agreement, it allows for the creation of unified subscriptions that are perfect for those hybrid cloud topologies or public cloud adoption initiatives, host of other scenarios. The subscription is extended or stretched between the on-premises Evergreen One deployment and the public cloud CBS instance. And as clients are moving workload from on-premises out to the public cloud or back again, the Evergreen One subscription costs don't change. In the unified subscription model, we don't care whether that consumption is happening on premises or out in the public cloud under CBS. And maybe best of all, sorry, Andrew.
No, it's one contract. Keep going. You're on in a roll.
And maybe best of all, using CBS in the public cloud clients are going to be paying far less than they would if they were just using native AWS or Azure storage resources because of the superior data dedupe and compression we introduce out into the public cloud. So in a real sense, not only have we brought the best of cloud operating models on premise into the private data center, into the private cloud, but we've also brought through CBS the best of enterprise storage technology out into the public cloud domain where it's sorely lacking. So things like thin provisioning, data at rest encryption, dedupe, compression, replication solutions, all those things are made available in the public cloud through CBS. And that gives clients a wide variety of choice to build the robust hybrid cloud topology that best supports their cloud journey. And it's these innovations that we believe constitute really the minimum viable product for a true enterprise class consumption-based offering. And we hold that belief for a variety of reasons, but chief among them is the ability of Evergreen One to help clients manage risk. And we've been talking about that, right? So risk elimination or de-risking service delivery and operations, it's a recurring theme when you start to understand and appreciate the power and benefits of an Evergreen One subscription. And you start with financial risk management, all that uncertainty we talked about facing clients causes them to pad forecasts and overbuy when they use that traditional capacity-oriented approach to procuring storage resources. Incredibly cost inefficient. All that excess capacity translates into excess spend that will never deliver value to the business. Contrast that with Evergreen One, which as a consumption-based pay-as-you-go model, it eliminates that overspend and dramatically de-risks the financial profile of storage operations. But that's just one way in which Evergreen One can eliminate risk or transfer it back to Pure. And from a client's perspective, that's just as good, right? As long as I'm not holding the risk, fine by me. And so technology obsolescence risk is eliminated. Evergreen One is a service subscription, and it's backed by Pure's Evergreen architecture. So Pure is responsible for ensuring that underlying service infrastructure is never at risk of end of life, never at risk of end of service, and will never need downtime in order to keep it current. Service level risk related to availability and delivery transferred to Pure. Not only does that Evergreen architecture deliver continuous availability, but the on-demand buffer means that provisioning lead times will never suffer due to the lack of the necessary infrastructure, right? The on-demand buffer is on the floor waiting to be used, but never paid for unless it is used. So you can respond to service requests quite rapidly. And then finally, service level risk related to performance, again, transferred back to Pure. Pure is on the hook to maintain performance levels throughout the term of the subscription. And we're going to do whatever necessary for us to live up to that commitment, that commercial commitment, swapping out controllers, adding disk packs, adding arrays, whatever necessary. In short, as a true storage as a service subscription backed by unparalleled technology, Evergreen One offers this rich risk mitigation capability to clients that extends from the economic dimension to the operational dimension and beyond. And probably heard me allude to it a number of times, but it's all made possible by the underlying Evergreen architecture here, Andrew. It's what makes all of this possible.
And I think actually I almost heard you doing like we were like 2, 3, 4 dimensions, maybe 5 dimensions of de-risking. There's a great comment from Ernesto in the chat actually about Evergreen being one of his favorite things about Pure Storage, maybe probably the favorite thing underpinning all of this. Sometimes when we talk about Evergreen, we are referring to it from a consumption model standpoint, Evergreen One. Truly, it's in the name, but there's also the core Evergreen technology under the stack that underpins everything from a Pure standpoint, whether you're choosing to do it via an outcome consumption-based model, Evergreen One. So that's long life chassis, upgradable, expandable flash. There's no natural home for the flash. You can actually do non-disruptive upgrades in family and between family on controllers. We've seen that as well. Then I think I'll just kind of pull this together to get us to section number 4, John. There is still, as many people listening may be on what we called Evergreen Forever. Previously, that was called Evergreen Gold. That was kind of a classic, better than average CapEx consumption model because you pay flat maintenance and it keeps going forever. That doesn't feel like normal purchase, but it's better than average. And Flex is then somewhere in between the two of those in a way, although it's more, instead of being a term-based license, it's a usage-based license. We'll explore Flex a little bit more in the next section in the what's new. but just making sure that this is not we're not moving away from any of the stuff we've done in the past. If anything, we're adding more flexibility as part of Flex. Okay.
Mhm.
I think if you don't mind, John, we'll jump to the third poll here.
Sure.
So, Olivia, if you could launch the poll number 3 with regards to as a service. Curious what's most important to your organization. Not going to read the answers. You can do that, as well as what are some characteristics of a true storage as a service to you. And we had a little bit of fun with that question. We'll see what it means to you. But I'll go ahead and leave that poll up as you go into section number 4.
I wanted to vote, Andrew. I wanted to vote on that poll. They won't let me.
I think I know what your vote's going to be. We'll tease that we'll tease it and we'll say what it is at the end, because I'm pretty sure I know what yours is. So last one. What's new in this section? So some of what you just referred to, John, some of it is what we've been doing since the very beginning, actually, when it was even called Pure as a Service, when Paul was covering this 2 years ago. But there's been improvements there and then changes and additions, even in what you covered. But let's just dial in specifically on what's new, maybe specifically around Evergreen Flex. I'll let you hit on that. And then I may hit on some of the other ones to compress them a little bit to bring us home. And apologies, we'll be going a little bit past the 45-minute mark, but usually everyone stays around the Q&A. So hopefully that feels all right. But I always like to flag that when I can sense we'll go a little bit longer. John, Evergreen Flex.
Yeah. So when you look at the enhancements and updates to the subscription portfolio, it speaks to the level of seriousness with which Pure treats the subscription business model. And it starts with the addition of a brand new subscription modality in Evergreen Flex. We had a lot of customers that recognize the value of a consumption-driven model to help them better align the cost of technology to its actual consumption. But for a variety of reasons, they couldn't exercise the use of Evergreen One. Now, maybe that was driven by the need to retain ownership of the hardware because of regulatory oversight mandates. In some cases, they were driven by just a desire to carry assets on the books for financial reporting purposes. Some clients presented us with the problem of they often found themselves with islands of stranded capacity, and they wanted help with that. And frankly, because Evergreen One is a true service subscription, we aren't yet able to offer it everywhere in the world. So clients would approach us and say, well, you can't offer Evergreen One in this particular location. What else you got as a consumption-driven dimension? And that's why we introduced Flex. With that list of client requirements, Evergreen Flex was developed to slot nicely into that space. It allows clients to own and control the hardware with the flexibility to pay for the subscription based on utilization of purchase capacity. It has a nice feature for data pack mobility to address that stranded capacity issue that I mentioned earlier. It even allows clients to book the asset for financial reporting purposes. And clearly, we can offer it in locations where we can't yet offer Evergreen One. So they get at least the value of that consumption element, even if they don't get the full rich risk mitigation that comes with a full storage as a service offering. They get at least the consumption element of it that helps them with financial management risk.
You joined us last month. Thank you, John. You might have heard about this product called FlashBlade E. That's all we talked about last month, actually, around like hard drives and disk dinosaurs and all that stuff. So if you're wondering how is that reflected in the Evergreen One service catalog, well, here you go. Until a couple months ago, this had, let me see if I can get it right, 7 columns here, maybe 8 with the title column, kind of thing. So there's a 9th column added in the service catalog around UDR, Unstructured Data Repository. I think I got that right. That is targeted toward the profile of where FlashBlade E fits within our portfolio, but available at a full consumption basis. And you may even remember Justin mentioning this because he talked about how if you purchase FlashBlade E, it's 468 terabytes raw. Of course, that's less usable. From a consumption standpoint, it's actually a little bit lower if you go on a consumption basis, kind of thing, or at least the minimum entry point.
And we introduced it on the same day, Andrew, that FlashBlade E was announced. That's how serious we are about making sure our storage as a service customers have access to this important underlying technology capability.
Sounds like a good product launch kind of thing to do. You put it in all the different consumption models day one. As well, let's see now. It's in January. Had Brian Gold on, and we were embracing sustainability, and some of the efficiency claims seem too good to be true for Pure. And how are those actually true? We dove into some of the better science content, both with Brian and with Justin. There's actually, when we talked about SLAs and kind of de-risking, there's now, John, not just the availability, capacity, performance, because it shouldn't just be capacity, but there's even an efficiency here. You mind commenting on that?
Yeah, the industry's first and only efficiency SLA. We are guaranteeing a power consumption profile for qualifying subscriptions. And if we find that we're in breach of our efficiency service level commitments, not only will the client receive service credits commensurate with the length of time that the solution is exhibiting a higher power consumption profile than we've committed to, but we will come in and remedy the situation by doing data pack consolidations or other means at no cost to the client. And of course, with no interruption of service. I mean, that is how committed we are to helping clients meet sustainability goals, that we're putting money on the line here.
Watts per, actually it's tibabyte, but watts per terabyte, the amount you consume. The last one here is, and this is almost worth its whole other topic, because that's actually what we did with Sandeep back in March covering Pure One. But there's a whole aspect of Pure One here that is actually meant to help support visibility and flexibility for customers who are choosing to do Evergreen One. I mind kind of giving a summary here of some of the changes, and then I'll go through a couple more screenshots.
Sure, a litany of enhancements that have already been made to Pure One management interface to support the Evergreen subscription portfolio. We are committed to the belief that our subscription portfolio should be every bit as easy to monitor and manage as our FlashArray and FlashBlade products are. And that's why we poured so much effort into making Pure One an effective subscription management platform where our clients are able to monitor our performance against those service level commitments that we've made, perform simulations to get the impact analysis of taking certain actions against the subscriptions, as you see on the screen here, even initiating subscription management actions such as expansions, extensions, renewals, and more. So just a powerful complement of capabilities in Pure One today, with many more on the horizon, all with the idea of making Pure One that smart and easy to use subscription management platform.
So you mentioned subscription management. Hopefully this is big enough so folks can see it. You can actually find more of this online. Thanks to Matt Bradford, who's kind enough to provide some of these. So managing all the aspects of your subscriptions, multiple ones there, even asset management. That's never I don't know that anyone wakes up wanting to do asset management, but if it's not done well, it can be very painful. So you need to be able to track the contracts, the life cycles, and alignment of all that stuff. Even planning, that was actually the previous screenshot. So you can kind of see what's the projected growth. Where is it going to be? Do I want to go and increase my reserved commit, et cetera? Because on-demand isn't bad, but periodically you may want to move the commit up as your environment grows. And then even self-service upgrades that you still can control, even as a service consumption model. You can control and request self-service upgrades, either to push forward into new features and capabilities or otherwise. I think with that, John, we made it through. It was a lot of stuff. I see some good questions in the chat, which we're going to hold. Thank you so much for being a great guest. I knew that you would be, and I appreciate the preparation time.
You froze
any final thoughts on your end before we go to the drawing?
Yeah. Sure. First of all, I want to thank you for letting me join you on Coffee Break. It's been my pleasure, my honor. This is a big deal for me. This is like a bucket list item for me, Andrew. So
That's awesome.
And of course, I want to thank the viewing audience as well. And just thinking about the title of the Coffee Break that's on screen, which is a great title, by the way. I forgot to mention, really captured the essence of the problem in a well-constructed storage as a service solution can address. But I just leave the audience with this thought that maybe it's an endearing attribute of human nature to have a cognitive bias towards optimism, towards overestimating the likelihood of positive outcomes. But even the best design plans never go according to plan. And when obstacles present themselves or course corrections are needed, you need a storage as a service solution that has the right level of flexibility and risk mitigation capabilities, and a technology partner that will stand behind it. And I would submit that Evergreen One is that solution, and Pure Storage is that partner.
Awesome close. Man, I don't think I have anything to add to that. So, but that's why I had you on. What a surprise. Some folks I know are staying around for the drawing. So just in case you were, we actually changed it up this month. You might have noticed it's an Ember 12-ounce travel mug, retail value $199, the kind you can control with your phone, and it's easier to travel with. I actually need to go figure out that means, but hey, you can figure that out yourself if you're the winner or not. Maybe you just want to go get it anyway. I appreciate, and I'm looking here, today's raffle winner is Charles M. from California. Olivia will be reaching out to you, and I'm making sure to get that to you. As well, since this is a series, please make sure to join us again next month. Tetris is amazing. It still is amazing, but not for your storage. a truly unified storage array, being joined by John Carnes. And with that, we are at the end. But as always, we will hang out here for about, kind of 5-10 minutes, however long all of you want to hang out with us. I'll kind of pull the music back up here a little bit, play in the background. This is where I'll just say for me, it's where I let my hair down if I still had enough hair to let down. So I won't presume on you, John. But we're kind of let it relax a little bit. And actually, usually we'll see folks saying. So let's actually pull up some Q&A. I'll toss this. Errol and Matt have been doing a great job with the Q&A, but I think so. I may pull a couple back here. There was one question. I want to scroll back. This was in the chat, actually. All the thank yous for everybody. Thank you. Thanks for the thanks. We appreciate it. It was around AWS, and I think I'm just about back to scrolling on it. The question was basically around if you're in AWS, can this apply? And you hit that brief. Yeah, is it possible to use with AWS or maybe even AWS only? I'll just toss that directly to you, John.
Absolutely, yeah. You can use Cloud Block Store in AWS without a deployment into your private data center, anywhere else really. So Cloud Block Store does work in isolation with the cloud service provider, with Azure, with AWS as well, and it's a very effective solution. It's really been catching on, really gaining traction. Absolutely. Yes.
I actually have a very large health organization. I don't know if this is going to be a public case study or not, but it's in the 7-8 figure range. So we're not just making this up. Oh, and thank you. Actually, that's I forgot the poll, sharing the third poll result. We'll do that in just a second. Thank you, Olivia, for ending that. But we are actually we're not just making this up. We're seeing some very large movement in this direction, even in a solely public cloud arena. 7-8 figures. You can figure out what that means, right? Kind of thing, but they're big numbers. People truly buying into this. Okay, quick pause. I forgot to share the poll. So for those who stayed around, hey, you get to see the poll results. So let's share them back out. John, actually, let's do question number 1 first. So question 1, what's the most important for your organization? That's a pretty even split again, with operational agility coming out on top. Financial, the money didn't come first.
Yeah, it makes sense. They're all important. Too often it's reduced to just a financial engineering solution, but it's much more than that. It is about the operational aspect. It is about sharing the risk. And clearly our audience kind of gets that already. So it's impressive.
Question number 2, what are some characteristics of a true storage as a service offering? So what was your answer there, John?
All of the above? I can't remember the options that were in there. But
so we had a little bit of fun with this because being real from our perspective, it should be all of the above. It's not any one of those matters. But if you don't have all of those, you don't actually have storage as a service. So we weren't trying to be too annoying with the poll question, because I was even curious to see how people responded. So 28% said all of the above. 13% said, flexible for changing requirements. 20% always non-disruptive. That matters. 24% consumption driven. 16% you can exit at the end, walk away, no harm, no foul. We're done. I think I'll go ahead and stop the share there. That was long enough to let folks see it, hopefully. There were a couple more questions I'm going to go and pull up here, and even in some cases ones that were already answered, just because I feel like they're worth pulling back out. Let's go to a totally non-technology question from Norman. What is your favorite grind coarseness, John? We said at the beginning we'd go back.
Wow, I'd have to go back and check. So am I allowed to mention the manufacturer of the grinder So I do a pour over. Yeah. I do a pour over, and the manufacturer, which is a company called Bellow, they make an old grinder, and they say, if you're doing the pour over, set it to this. And I did it ages ago. I forget what I set it to. But I use a pour over coarseness, I guess, without being able to specify the actual size of the grinder.
What's too funny is to Joseph, who actually attended as a guest, listed as a guest, he actually guessed that it was what you were using. So that's pretty amazing. Or maybe he just knows you, or I don't know.
Words out now.
It's amazing. Another question. So are there equivalent cloud products for all pure on-prem products? So kind of. You want to take a first shot at that, or I can? Either way.
Yeah, please jump in. I mean, certainly Cloud Block Store is aligned to our block solutions, but there's a fair amount of interplay between our file and object, our UFFO, Unified File and Object solutions in the public cloud as well, because of our ability to do snaps to native S3 formats. So we can do a snap straight to the cloud S3 bucket at will, or you can. What am I missing there?
Well, the other facet that I go down sometimes is there's the aspect of what we can actually truly run in the cloud at a software level. So that would be cloud block store, virtual flash array, but better than just being a virtual appliance. We did more work to make it a real virtual storage array. What I also see in this space is when you pair up Evergreen One, consumption-based stuff, across any product in our portfolio, even the physical products, if you put them in a colo environment, like say an Equinix that has high-speed interconnects into the cloud that aren't metered. So this is like Express Route Direct. I'm losing my terms here with AWS and Azure. That actually allows you to consume all the cloud services, have the data live on something that has this very similar kind of cloud type billing model. And so even though it's technically pure hardware, the actual total experience is I'm using cloud services. I control my data gravity working for me, hopefully. And all the billing and consumption and all the other pieces at a storage level feel cloudy like you would want them to be. So it's not quite equivalent cloud, but it gets the same outcome. That's the goal.
Yeah. And that's, we eat some of that very same dog food, don't we, in our own operations here. And it works very well.
We do. Maybe the last one here, just because, probably last one or two. So there was one question here where someone said, sorry, this is Adam. Sorry if I missed this, but what are the included hardware upgrades? And there's a little bit of, I don't know that I can give a straight answer there, but it's just that we are responsible for keeping the hardware upgraded to match the outcome, the service level agreement. Like if you actually go back and look at the various tiers, I think I can get there. The tiers actually have some performance things behind them. It's not shown on this slide necessarily. We will make sure the hardware is at state where it can do that. Anything else you want to add there on the hardware upgrade aspect that we're
I mean, obviously there's at least two dimensions, probably more than I'm forgetting. Us, to your point, living up to our service level commitments around the performance levels that we're guaranteeing they see, as well as making sure they're never in a position of being in a technology obsolescence situation, right? So we'll come in and upgrade the controllers long before there's any risk of end of service, end of life. And that's not something clients have to worry about because it is a service, right? They can forget about that burden. They leave that work to us, because in a service subscription, it is the responsibility of Pure to
That's our job. And actually, I will make this the last one just because it actually can kind of put two together. One from Eric. It's a question. It's a great one. Actually, glad someone asked this about his usage before or after data reduction. And then, kind of a question about entering base storage capacity in. Do I put an optimized utilization or raw capacity? We chose not to go into some of the usage capacity. I know I've got a short version of this, John. I'll let you go first, though, if that's all right, unless you want me to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so, we had a choice to make when we designed Evergreen One. We could bill on the pre-data reduction values or the post-data reduction values. For us, the most transparent way to allow clients to understand exactly what they were paying for without the variability of changing data reduction ratios was to build them on the host written data. That is what we meter and measure. And for us, it's also an industry trend. So a lot of people who didn't start that way and claim to have storage as a service solutions, or at least consumption-based solutions, they have switched now to pre-data reduction units of measure. Again, it takes that extra variable out of the charging equation, so there's never any surprises during invoicing about unexpectedly large amounts because the data reduction ratio is shifted against the client.
And maybe that's the key of it. It's about that transparency and predictability. Yes, Pure arrays are doing compression or deduplication or other things under the covers, and that helps it even to that to that efficiency guarantee that we're putting out there, right? Kind of thing from a watts per terabyte standpoint. But for you to know ahead of time what that's going to be, that's almost impossible to predict. I think so. The goal is not to be like, oh, we're taking all the benefits of that stuff. It's like, well, what model can we offer you that is predictable and transparent as far as how it actually works?
Absolutely.
With that, I think we are right at time. Please make sure to join us next month for what it shows there with John, talking about Tetris is amazing, but not for your storage. John, thank you. John Brett, not John Carnes, John Brett, thank you Once again, my name is Andrew Miller. Thank you on behalf of the entire Coffee Break team for joining us for this month's Coffee Break. Please make sure to tune in next month. Have a great day.